So thank you everyone for joining. We have a great group of people on here, lots of people. And as I said, a very diverse group from buyers, investors, sellers, real estate agents. And we're very lucky that Elaine is taking some time out of her day, Elaine Page, to discuss how to sell a tenanted property and the pitfalls of doing that. And on the other end, I'm a real estate agent, and Alex Wilson, broker owner of Remax Wealth Builders Real Estate, also an investor as well. I have nearly 20 properties now, so I deal with tenants on a daily basis. I also own a property management company called Access Toronto Property Management, and we lease over 100 properties a year and manage properties for our clients. So we are very knowledgeable in dealing with these tenant situations. And when Elaine and I were dealing with a situation in September, and we started chatting, and I proposed this this webinar. And it's as we are in this buyer's market, and sellers and investors are under stress because interest rates are up. They may want to sell their investment properties. They may have to sell their investment properties, which means if they're selling their investment properties, they're likely dealing with a tenant situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to allow Elaine to give a quick little bio on herself. And then to start off, I'm going to ask some questions about some myths of selling tenanted properties and what sellers think they can do and what they can't, and that will drive our conversation from there. So Elaine, why don't you give a quick little bio on yourself?
Sure. So thanks for the invite. It's always a pleasure to see you and work with you. My name's Elaine Page. I am a licensed paralegal. My firm name is Page Paralegal. It's P-A-G-E, not P-A-I-G-E. Website is pageparalegal.com. I have been practicing in this area for over 30 years now, which explains the gray hair. And at this point in my career, this is landlord and tenant is where I exclusively practice. So I've literally dealt with thousands and thousands of files over the years, and I'm gonna share with you today some of the things that I have learned along the way.
And I will tell everyone here, if you get yourself in a situation, before you make it worse, call Elaine, because if you try to do it on your own, you are going to make it worse. I know this, and this will come out of the stories that we talk about today. Because if you are a buyer, a seller, or an agent, the landlord tenant board favors the tenant. So you're already on thin ice. Any little mistake you make, you are going to be penalized for. I want to let you know that, and you're going to learn about this as we talk about today. So I love the first myth. I love this because I have this conversation all the time. Elaine, can I evict a tenant because I want to sell my property if I just give them 60 days notice?
Absolutely not.
And can you believe how many calls I get about this? It's a lot of people think you can just, hey, I'm selling my property, I can provide them notice and they have to leave. I just give them 1 month. No.
Yeah. So just to unpack that a little bit more, you can only terminate a tenancy in accordance with the act, and there are very narrow reasons with which you can evict. One would be non-payment of rent. Two would be behavioral issues, demolition, and then the third one would be if you require the premises for your own use, or if you've sold the premises and the purchaser requires the premises for their own use. But the caveat is that these are what are referred to as end of term notices. So if you're in the middle of a lease, you're 6 months into a 1-year lease, your termination date has to be at the end of your lease. It can't just be arbitrarily any date you choose.
Correct. Yes. And any notice that you give has to be start from a rental pay period. So just because let's say it's October. Oh, no, that's not true. That's true.
Well,
right?
Sort of.
Yeah,
I'll
okay.
let you finish,
Okay.
and then we'll see where we go with that.
Okay. So what I was going to say is if I'm on a month to month and I need to give my 60 days notice, October 15th, if they pay on the 1st of every month, October 15th is not my 60-day start date. That's correct, right?
Right. So it's end of term, and people screw this up all the time. So if the rent is payable on the first of the month, they think, oh, okay, well, they fill out the form and they say that the termination date is, January the 1st. Well, it's not. It's actually the last day of the term, which would be, in that case, December 31st. So we get into scenarios where it's like the 3rd of January and we want to give a 60-day notice. The 60-day notice really would be for March 31st.
Yep.
Even
And
though it's
important for,
way more than
yep.
within 60 days.
And important for people to know that, because also, if you screw that up, you're like, oh, and you go to the landlord tenant board, I'm just off by one day, it was on a mistake. Do they care?
So this is the big problem with these sorts of applications. So there's something that speaks to this idea that the notice itself cannot be amended in any way. So if you make a mistake, people think, okay, I can go to the board and oopsies, my bad. I got the wrong date in there, but it's more than 60 days. It will get thrown out. So now you've waited about 8 months for a hearing, and you get to the hearing and the adjudicator will say, we have a preliminary issue, and they'll dismiss your application. You can't save it. You can amend an application, but you cannot amend a notice of termination. And this, I mean, if you sat in and listen to the boards, they're all the hearings are on Zoom, and if you would be amazed at how many applications get dismissed for a technicality, and the frustration of landlords because of it.
Yeah. And again, this webinar is to paint the reality for everyone on here. But if you take the right steps, you can avoid these pitfalls. So number 2, I like this one. You get this one. I get this one all the time. Okay, Alex. Okay, I can't evict them. That's no problem. How am I? I'll get them out with an N12. We'll serve them an N12 that I'm going to move into the property. Okay, Alex, we're going to do this. And then once they move out, we'll just put it in the market and we'll sell it. No problem. Elaine, can I do that?
Well, you can do that if you're very wealthy and you have, $100,000 to spare. There's when you do an application for your own use, you actually have to reside there for a period of no less than 1 year. And if you go ahead and then, do that and then put the property on the market, the test for a bad faith application is, did the landlord put the property on the market within that 1 year period? And if the answer is yes, then then it's automatically determined that it's bad faith. And the onus becomes on the landlord to prove why it's not bad faith. And, there are situations where there's been a death or a job opportunity or some legitimate reason. But if you don't have a legitimate reason, you're going to be subject to a lot of fines. You would be potentially subject to paying the difference in rent between your old rent and your new rent of the tenant. You may be ordered to pay an entire year's worth of rent back to the tenant. So, not a good idea.
No. It's something that you want to avoid. This one here.
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm just gonna add to that. I get calls every day, as I'm sure you do, about how do we kind of skirt around some of these rules. And the answer is very simple. You can't. If you think you're so clever that you've devised or concocted this way to skirt around the regulations, you'll find yourself in a sorry state, because the board isn't stupid, the adjudicators aren't stupid, and anything that you think is brilliant and that you've thought of has already been thought up ahead of you and tried and failed. Yes. So I want to be really clear. There are rules in place and they have to be followed. You cannot get creative with those rules.
And they're exactly, and they take the tenant side. They're not going to take your side. They take the tenant side. Can I take pictures of the tenants of the property I want to list for sale? I'm just, Alex, go in there, take some pictures of the property. just so we can list it on MLS. Yeah, can we take pictures of the property, Alex? Elaine, can we take pictures of the property without the tenant's approval?
No. So this has actually become a real privacy issue. So one of the things that I would do ahead of all of this is in your lease, and we'll talk about Ontario standard lease agreements. I would put a clause in there that allows you to take pictures for the purposes of listing the property or for damages. Now, you cannot really take pictures if you're involving the tenant's personal items, and that's where the privacy issues come out. And there's different decisions on this, but my recommendation is you don't do that. What we do is we tell the tenant ahead of time, we're taking pictures, or we'd like to take pictures. May we have your permission? And we do this in writing. And please remove any personal or move any personal items so that they do not go into the pictures. And you'll get some tenants who will say absolutely not, and then you'll get some tenants who will say sure, no problem. But whatever answer you get it in writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very important. Now, okay, we list the property. It is tenanted. We sell it. We're doing it. We're doing everything above board. We're good people. We sell it. The person we sell it to, they're going to move into it. Okay. We issue an N12 with the proper notice time. Okay. But the tenants don't leave at the end of the sale. Elaine, can the tenants do that?
Sure. If you look at the N12, and I have one, I can share my screen with you if you want, but it very clearly says that the tenant doesn't have to leave based on an N12, that they're entitled to a hearing at the board. So I get people who want to sue tenants all the time because they didn't leave on the N12. You can't, there's no way you can do that. It would 100% fail because the tenant's got the right to have the matter heard at the board. You should be looking at protecting yourself with clauses in your agreement of purchase and sale that deal with what happens if you can't provide vacant possession. Unfortunately, I can't provide you with those clauses because as a licensed paralegal, that we have a limited scope of practice, and drafting those sorts of clauses are not within our scope of practice. So there's several lawyers out there who have them. I think you have that as well, Alex. I'm sure there's different groups that you can share that, but it's important to have that because if you don't close, there's a potential for huge liability on
Massive.
the landlord, and you want to protect yourself as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, massive liability. And so as a buyer, if you're a buyer on there and you're buying a tenanted property, and again, I lived it, the tenant doesn't have to leave, and you might be homeless. So it's something important for an investor, seller to know, and for a buyer to know. And an agent to know, because you just think that you've done everything above board, but the tenant doesn't have to leave. Now, I will put an asterisk. Do the tenants leave? They'll probably leave. Like Elaine's like, I don't know, but most people are reasonable. And
most people are, but I'll just share a story with you.
Please share the stories.
And I mean, this is a story that it would apply to many of my clients at present, where essentially they do the purchase and sale agreement. They've got an N12, and as you mentioned, and quite correctly, with interest rates going up on mortgages, there's a lot of people who, when they go to renew, their mortgages are double what they were paying, and the rent doesn't cover it, and they cannot afford the difference between the delta between the rent and the new mortgage payment. So they end up in a bit of a financial crisis situation. And so I've got several of these files happening now, and in one case, the landlord went ahead and did the notice themselves. they did it incorrectly. I got involved. I reissued. The tenant said they were going to leave. And I said, okay, well, we need to sign off on that. And of course they didn't. We filed at the board, and the expectation at the board is about 8 months for this type of hearing. And this is really impactful if you're trying, nobody's going to do an 8-month closing, right? And now we're in a scenario where my clients are in dire financial straits and potentially will lose their primary homes. And we have filed for an expedited hearing, and we did get an expedited hearing on the grounds of hardship. However, there's no guarantee you're going to get that. And even with an expedited hearing, the hearing's 3 months. So it's already past the closing date. So now the deal's falling apart. Tenant's still sitting there, and they got to put the property back on the market again. And I'm not sure what's going to happen, because the chances are they're going to lose the property because they can't afford the mortgage payment. So it's sad, but this is happening across the board, and people are really panicking because they're in dire financial straits because of the mortgage rates.
Yep. And again, that's the system that we're in. I have some, I noticed some people from Alberta, they're probably spinning in their chairs going like, how can that be? No, that's how it is in Ontario. This is the reality.
And I want to do the flip side of that as well, because I mean, although I primarily only represent landlords, there is a tenant side to this as well. So like, it's important to recognize that. So let's say we have a unit that was rented out in COVID, and as we know, the rental dropped in COVID because nobody was moving. So now we've got a unit that's $1,500 a month. The market for that same unit, the market rent would be $2,500 a month. So, the tenant, in order to find new housing, is going to have to find something in that $1,500 mark. There isn't anything, or at least not equivalent. So they're facing paying $1,000 more a month, which is substantial. I mean, that's a lot of money. For some people, that's do or die, right? So this is the reason they're not leaving so quickly, because they're just not in a position to be able to. It's not that they're malicious or trying to cause problems. They've got nowhere to go. And that's when we get into cash for keys, which we can talk about more. But
I have that note for that.
Yeah, but that's what's happening. So the tenants aren't your enemies. They're not trying to screw you over. They're trying to take care of their own interests. And I think a lot of landlords get really frustrated, like, how dare they not leave? You got to remember, they have lives. This is their home. This isn't, some random thing they bought on a whim. It's their home. So you've got to be cognizant of that.
And that's my line right here. Like I have underlined on my notes, I'm like, how to sell a property with a tenant. My number one point right off the bat is you are selling someone's home. It is an investment to you. You are selling someone's home. And really, they have no vested interest of you selling their home, because that's where they live. So you have to take that mindset of, you are actually selling someone's home. This is where they live. Now, the best thing to do to sell a tenanted property is don't sell a vacant property. And we're gonna get into that a little bit later. But I want to talk to, like, in these situations, there are going to be situations where you have to sell a property with a tenant in it. So be nice. First off, be nice. Have a conversation with the tenant. As Elaine says, they're looking after themselves, right? And again, if you have a conversation with them and you're nice, there are people will be accommodating. You just have to understand where they're coming from. Some things you can do. Offer flexibility with showing times. Don't force showings down a tenant's throat. What I do personally is I go to them. I say, okay, here's a window. We're not going to do things too early. We're not going to do things too late. Let's accommodate showings within this window. We'll tighten it up a little bit on the weekend because you're going to be home during the weekend. And are there any other times within that period that you don't want showings that are too difficult for you? So you want to work with them for the showing times. Now you don't want to give them too much flexibility because then they'll give you 1 hour on a Thursday and that's not going to work either. Right. So you got to control the situation when you're talking with them. So tell them when you're going to do the showings, but also limit the window as well right off the bat, so you show that you're accommodating. You don't do showings 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day. That's going to start annoying a tenant. Just give a nice window per day, and then if someone's in extreme need of seeing a property and they can't show in that window, talk to the tenant and then see if you can get them in during that window, but make that the exception of the rule. Number two, offer them a free cleaning.
Again,
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just, while we're on
Of
it,
course.
can I just add to your showings piece? Because showings are often a problem. So the first thing I would do is I would sit down with the tenant and say, I want you to know we're putting the property up for sale, because there's nothing more shocking to a tenant, especially like in a condo where there's no for sale sign, to suddenly get a call from an agent saying, okay, we're coming to do a showing, go clean up and what have you. So be upfront and say, we need to put this property on the market. We're going to start showings, and I want you to think about what happens if we sell this, because the chances are we're going to have to ask you to leave. And the tenants appreciate that kind of honesty. They really appreciate that kind of honesty, and you can understand why. They don't want to be hit with a 60-day notice out of the blue. With respect to the window, I would suggest no more than 3-hour windows. So we see this, I've seen this over and over again, where agents will say, 9 a.m. to 9 a.m. every day, and they'll send out a notice. Well, that's really an abusive process. 2-hour windows are the right way to go, 3 hours if you have to. And one of the things that happens with showings is that, and this happens with real estate brokerages all of the time, they'll send out, they've got this automated system which sends out text messages to the tenant.
Yep.
And the tenant receives it, and then they get, the other agent who's bringing their client through gets there, knocks on the door, and the tenant says, sorry, I'm not letting you in.
Yep.
And then they call in a panic. And the reality is that there are rules of service for these notices, and text messages through a real estate brokerage to the tenant is not acceptable notice. If you have an Ontario standard lease agreement and it is checked off that you can email the tenant, then you can email them. If you don't have that, you actually quite literally have to go there and deliver notice. And that notice can be put under the door, which in condos is very difficult. It can be handed to the tenant. It can be handed to an adult member of the household. It can be where mail is normally delivered. Those are acceptable forms of service, but not, those text messages are not.
There everyone goes. I learned something today.
Right.
And it's important that you get your Ontario standard leases signed by all your tenants as well.
Yeah.
And also, it is mandatory. And we'll talk more about that conversation in my next part. But I just want to talk about being nice to tenants a little more. Offer them a free cleaning of their property as well. But don't tell them their property's messy. Okay. Been there. Didn't tell someone the property was messy, but I did offer them a free cleaning. And then they were insulted because they insinuated that they thought I insinuated that their place was messy. You careful how you ask if they want a free cleaning of their like I offer them a free cleaning, going, hey, just wouldn't you like a free cleaning of your property so you don't have to clean it? Offer that right off in the beginning. Gift cards for dinners, that kind of stuff. Not every showing, but you just offer them one off the bat. Just again, you want to build up that relationship so they're on side, so that they open the door when there's appointments. You want a relationship you're building with the tenant to get the property sold. That's if you sell the property with the tenant in there. Now, as Elaine said, you're going to want to have a conversation with the tenant before it even goes to market. The best way to sell a tenant property is don't sell a property without the tenant in there. And this is where we're going to go talk about, first off, having that conversation with the tenant. If you start the conversation with the tenant 2 months prior to you listing it for sale, now, not everyone has that ability to give that notice, but if you start talking to the tenant and let them know, hey, in 60 to 90 days, I'm going to be listing the property for sale. I wanted to give you notice about that because I want to work with you, but once the property's sold, we're going to have to give you notice to move out. Now, with giving them 60 to 90 days notice that they're going to be going to market and kind of implying that all the showings and everything that are going to be going with that, they may not want to go through that whole process. They may just go like, hey, you know what? We're going to start looking for a place now and we'll move out. We just don't want people going through our property and everything like that. If you have that conversation far in advance, the tenant may move out voluntarily. And there's other incentives you can give too. So for example, you could say to them, hey, we're going to be listing 60 to 90 days. But if you decide that you want to move out before the 60 to 90 days, I'll give you 1 month rent, which I would be required to give you if I were giving you the notice. So you're incentivizing them to leave even before you're listing, and they're not penalizing them for leaving before you give them notice. These are conversations that you want to have with your tenant and if you're an agent, with your seller, like, hey, these are things that you want to do. Because I will tell you, in this market, if I get showings on a property that's tenanted, that property is going to sell anywhere between 5 to 7% less than a property that's vacant and staged. That's a reality. So now we're putting a dollar figure on that to the seller, going, hey, if we start this conversation early, then I won't have to discount the property so much to get it sold. Why would I have to discount the property? The seller asks. Well, you tell the seller, listen, you are selling someone's home. So that means you have an occupant in the property that has no vested interest in you selling the property. They have no motivation for you to sell the property. It's negative, most likely. So how do you think they're going to keep the property? Do you think it's going to be in good condition? No. They'll just leave it as how they're living, or maybe they'll make it worse because they don't want the property to sell. We've all seen that scene in Step Brothers where Will Ferrell and William H. Casey are trying to sabotage the sale of their parents' home, but that seller, just leaving some stuff on the counter. There's no need that a tenant has to clean up a counter before, does the tenant have to leave a property during a showing? No. So the tenants are just hanging out, having their Sunday brunch while you're showing.
Or in one case that came across my desk this week, they're at home having sex while you're doing your showing.
Yeah, these things can happen. And there's nothing you can do about it. So why go through that pain of that? I like in that case, yeah, be a put off. But like the buyers, when you bring them into a tenant property, are immediately put off, and especially put off if they're not comfortable going in a property when people are. They don't like it. They do not like it at all. Buyers do not like it. They want to get out of there as fast as possible. Or when it's tenanted, the mess that they see, they're disgusted. They're not interested in the property. So it's not in first date condition. What I call first date condition is when I list properties, I like to have it in first date condition, fully cleaned, walls painted, fully staged, because when people go into property, they're in the property for 5 to 10 minutes and they're making a decision if they want to buy it or not. Just like if you're in a first date looking across the table for someone, if you're interested in going on a second date with them, they're not in first date condition. So now it's going to sell for less than that nice looking property that's listed, that's fully staged. On top of that, we talked about the fact that if you're a buyer and you buy a tenanted property, the tenant may not leave. So you may not have a home and at the end of the 60 days. So now the buyer is going to say, hey, I heard about the risks about buying this tenanted property. I might not have a home. So I'm still interested in the property, but I want a discount for that risk. Like, if I get a discount for that risk, then I'm okay assuming the risk, because I know eventually this tenant's going to move out. So if I'm taking this risk on, then I just want a discount on the property. That's where the 5 to 7% discount comes on. So now when you're talking to the tenant, this is where cash to keys come into play. First of all, you have that conversation with the tenant, as I recommended off the bat, going, hey, we're going to list in 60 to 90 days. But if you want to move out earlier or something like that, we'll compensate you with 1 month of rent. But if you have a more difficult tenant, you may need to incentivize them a little more. And Elaine, I'll let you talk a little bit more about cash for keys and how that works and some of the negotiations you've probably been in.
Sure. Okay. I just want to back up a bit. So,
Yeah, of course.
In this situation where a tenant is interfering with your ability to show the unit, you do have some recourse. They can be served with a notice of termination for substantial interference with the landlord's legal rights. It's still, I say that sort of tongue in cheek, because to get that to a hearing is still 7-8 months away. So, by that point, you have a very stale listing. The idea of giving them money up front, it just to, as I say, I'm always somebody who thinks you should be honest with people generally. So this is no exception. If you tell them that, you're putting it up for sale, Alex, I think your numbers are a little bit low right now.
There, great.
The
Even
market
better.
has changed.
Oh, it's
so we
changed
started
dramatically.
we started doing cash for keys a few, sort of around COVID, the beginning of COVID, and the numbers were what they were. But now, because of what I've identified, is that the rental market is such that to replace that unit is going to cost substantially more money. 1 month ain't going to cut it. So I would come in at least 2 months rent, and they don't get that money unless they sign an N11. So we get people who verbally say sure, and then we get landlords who cut a check, and the tenants go out on a nice vacation somewhere and come back and say, I changed my mind. You got nothing in writing, you got no recourse. So there's a form referred to as an N11, which is an agreement to terminate the tenancy. And that's the form you use if you're doing any kind of cash for keys deal. So I would start at about 2 months in the initial negotiation. Now we've got an offer on the table, and let's face it, most offers want vacant possession in 2 months. That's sort of the reasonable amount. There is no way that I'm going to be able to get you or you on your own are going to get vacant possession of the landlord and tenant board in 2 months' time. Not going to happen. So I'm getting asks now anywhere between $20,000 and $100,000. I'm not saying I'm paying or my clients are paying $100,000. That's not within the realm. But I am getting clients who are paying $30,000, because if you think about it being $1 million property, $30,000 to ensure that your sale goes through is not that out of line. And I will also tell you that tenants are increasingly savvy. There's all sorts of Facebook pages where tenants groups gather and tell each other what the going rates are, what they got, how to navigate this, and people have access to information. So don't be surprised if you get a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 ask. If you decide, okay, now we've got this pending closing and the tenants are asking for $20,000, let's break that down. Again, their rent's going to be $1,000 more a year, so that's $12,000 and that's just for 1 year. They're going to have moving costs of $1,000 to $2,000. So, it starts to add up over the long term. And that's why those numbers seem like a lot, but they're actually not that unreasonable. So when I do these deals, what I do is I have friendly conversations with the tenant. I usually start with writing them a letter and saying, here's what's going on. A lot of people don't have the funds available to pay first and last somewhere else, nor do they have the funds available to pay their moving expenses. So we cut a deal, and we're going to use the number 20,000 as a reasonable number. On signing, so they sign an agreement and they sign an N11, they get $10,000. Now, if they don't leave, they have to pay that $10,000 back. So that gives them their first and last, their moving expenses, and that kind of takes that stress away. Okay, we can do this now. And on the day of vacant possession, provided they've left the unit in good condition, they get the second $10,000. Well, they hand over the keys, they get the second 10. So this makes it much easier for everybody. The problem, of course, is if the landlord doesn't have access to the money for the cash or keys, but that, that is what it is. We can't change that, but that's how to do it. And don't be surprised if you get a $30,000 ask. That is pretty much the going rate on a lot of these units, like the higher end units now. It's completely within the realm of possibility.
Yep. And so this is where have conversations with your tenants. And again, when you do the math, I said it's going to be 5 to 7% discount to try again, if I'm even getting showings on the property, because the buyers don't want to even take that risk. 5 to 7%.
Well, I'm gonna just flip it back. So,
Mhm.
as an agent, you have a client who says, I want to go and look at, this amazing property. It's got a tenant.
Mhm.
So you're educated and you know what's going to happen if you put an offer in terms of getting vacant possession.
Mhm.
So would you, the chances are you might steer your client away from that property
Mhm.
because it's a major headache for them, and go with a unit that is going to have vacant possession on the closing day. I mean, that's happened. I hear that from agents all of the time,
Mhm.
where we just don't even look at tenanted properties because it's not worth the headache.
And I will say, frankly, buyers don't even want to look at tenanted properties anyways. If I just list the potential pitfalls, um, they don't want to deal with it, because if a buyer is out there, for the most part, they need a roof over their head as well. They're buying their home. They don't have the ability to go live somewhere for 8 months. And I will use this happened to me personally, when I bought my triplex, and the unit we were going to move into, the tenant didn't move out. I was already homeless. My property, that our
I
home,
remember.
my wife and I's home. We weren't married then. We were engaged. We were getting married in November. I was in closing. I was in Ireland. We're looking at our wedding venue. Tenant's like, "Yep, nope, not leaving," and we didn't have a home. We ended up extending our stay where we were staying. We're staying at a friend's house, and they were able to accommodate us, and it did work out. Within about 4 weeks, Elaine was able to broker that deal for us.
But
But
that
these are
was as a few years back before
Yep.
COVID.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah. This is this is
changed
this this
now,
is 20,
right?
this is 2016. This is
Right.
2016. Not as much information out there before COVID, everything like that. The person could go find another equivalent rental for not a big jump in price. These are things that individual could do. Not today. I'll also add on this, and this is a nod to Elaine, and why you want to use a paralegal. So let's go back. We talked about earlier, tenants, this is their home. There's a part of them, you got to see their side too. But we see your side too. This is money. And especially in this interest rate environment, you're going to get very angry when someone says, we're not going to allow you to sell your home. We're going to make it difficult to sell your home because we don't want to leave you taking your home away. And you're like, but I need the money. I'm in financial distress. I see these Facebook groups too. Landlords are crying, bleeding. Agents are telling these stories. But you and I know the reality. It doesn't matter all these sob stories that you have. It's not going to change the reality of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
I wanted one thing, then I'll let you chat.
go ahead. Go ahead.
But I wanted to say this is, and this is where the paralegal comes in. I have someone that's money. Money is a big factor that can get people's backs up. And now on the other side, you're taking someone's home. Well, they need somewhere to live. These are two things, when you combine them, can really lead to explosions. But when you have someone in the middle, they can help you work through that situation. It's going to calm the emotions. Elaine, I'll let you go now, but I want to really hammer that down to people.
Yeah, and it's true. And the other thing, and I don't want to dish real estate agents because I know how hard you guys work, but I do find that there have been several occasions where we've got real estate agents who are navigating these deals and doing the paperwork, and then they're not doing them correctly and they blow up. And then I get a panic call. And, a lot of real estate agents think they know what they're doing and they don't. And so, if your agent says to you, I got this, I've done this 100 times, it's all good. I would recommend having, it doesn't have to be me, but somebody who works in the field, a professional, review things before you sign off, because this agent may have the best intentions in the world, but it doesn't mean that they're right. So that's one of my caveats. I also want to just to say something else. So I want you to understand how the board functions. So we've got the N12, we've served the N12, everything is good, it's done properly. We've provided the statutory declaration, we've provided the compensation, which has to be provided before the termination date. And now we get in queue for the hearing 6, 7, 8 months away. We get the hearing and everything is going well. And now the adjudicators got to write their order. Well, the adjudicators don't write their orders right away. So they sometimes can take 2 or 3 months before you get the order. They've gotten much better in the last little while, but I have stuff I'm waiting for from July that I haven't got yet. So now we're going to say, let's just be fair. Let's say 2 months till you get your order. And if your property is in the city of Toronto, the city of Toronto sheriff, and that's the only person who can do an eviction, like execute an eviction, they're 1 month to 6 weeks behind. So now you're just like literally a year start to finish, which is why these cash for keys deals need to happen. And I get people saying, well, isn't that extortion? That's not my call. I'm sort of a more practical person that says you can do whatever, you can call whatever you want. This is the reality. And if you want to get this done, this is how you're going to get it done. And like, let's put aside that loaded language because it doesn't help anybody. And once you talk to the tenant, you might realize there's a legitimate reason why they need extra time, in which case you may be able to extend their closing. So they might have children in school, children who have special needs and they're in a special school and they need to be in the area to the end of June. There may be work considerations, there may be health considerations. You really need to find out what's going on with them and try to accommodate them as much as you can so that it's a win-win for everyone.
Yep, exactly. That's where conversations go a long way. What I'm going to do now, and I'm respectful of Elaine's time. I see questions, and I know everyone has their questions. So let's open up the floor to some questions. I see there's 7 questions that are being asked right now. We're going to give this a hard stop at noon because again we want to be respectful of Elaine's time, and I know questions can last an hour on their own. So I'm going to open up the questions now.
And before you do that, Alex, I'm going to say
yes.
this. I cannot give advice on specific situations because then I'm doing this sort of mass legal advice, which is not something I'm allowed to do. I can answer general questions.
Yes.
Not.
Now, can you see you can see the Q&A, right, Elaine?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
right.
I'm fully going to give you let you answer the Q&A because you give the right answers, and as you pointed out, real estate agents don't always give the right answers, and I'm very
most of the time you do though, Alex. Most of the time.
But I'm thankful when I get corrected by Elaine because whenever I do these, I always learn something. So I'm going to give Elaine the control of the Q&A, and we're going to stop this at noon for everyone. So
okay, thank you. So the anonymous attendees asking for non-payment of rent can't give notice during the term. Sure you can. Before I even go there, I want to just let you all know there's a website called, and this is good for tenant screening, for just because you're all investors or in the business.
Yeah,
there's a website called openroom.ca, and what's happening is people are uploading orders into that website, and it's not fully, comprehensive, but it has a number of orders in there. So as part of your tenant screening, I'd go in there and run your prospective tenant's name in there to see if they aren't being evicted somewhere else for non-payment, or have another landlord has incurred problems with them. The other thing I wanted to just give you a heads up on before I answer these questions is there's a lot of false credit reports out there now, and employment
so
reports.
many. Oh, we get Alicia got 6 in one day.
Right.
Alicia, the property manager, Elaine knows her.
So one of the things is when a tenant hands you their, like, that you think, oh, isn't that great? They've gone to the trouble and got their credit bureau pulled. I would never accept a tenant handing me a credit bureau, because I'm not saying all tenants are giving fake credit bureaus, but that lends itself to a fake credit bureau. So your real estate agent should be able to pull, or your property manager should be able to pull a credit bureau. And I don't know what the cost is, but whatever it is, it's well worth getting an accurate one.
Yeah.
Versus, I also have a colleague who is just started a business. He was a private eye, and now he's sort of, retired, but he's doing complete background checks on tenants or prospective tenants for this very reason, because there's so much fraud. So let me get to the questions. Non-payment of rent, it doesn't matter if you're in the middle of a lease. If a tenant isn't paying, you can start a application to terminate based on non-payment, and that is what's referred to as a voidable order. So at any time, if the tenant pays up the rent, then that's gone away.
Yeah.
So that's that one. Next, Alex,
we'll have the recording.
Will you send the recording of the yes. All right. Next one. If a multi-unit building has been sold to a developer with a closing a couple of years away, they want vacant possession. They are also working with the city to replace the unit. Should we be starting to empty the place, and the tenants that are resisting work with a board to get them out? That is a very specific question, particularly if the property is in the city of Toronto, because the city of Toronto, under the building, I forget what the municipal act is called, but section 111 talks about replacement housing. So in that situation, I would actually invite you to contact me directly. I've done a number of these, and I could walk you through it. Each case is nuanced and individual, so I'm not going to give a general answer here. So that one's done. Thanks for hosting this quick question. Is it unethical for the landlord to suggest an N11 to the tenant with 60 days notice? In this case, 1 month's rent would be given as a compensation and avoiding. No, this is not unethical. This is exactly what we've been talking about. It's completely ethical. As long as you're not harassing the tenant, then you know, if you want to offer them a month or 2 months or whatever it may be, if they say no, you have to honor the no. It's a no. You can't come back to them every 2 days and say, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Because then you're harassing them. But it's not unethical. It's like, okay, next.
It's a re-asking of the developer question. So we'll go to the next one after that.
Yeah. In a hot market, 20 to 30,000 seems reasonable to market and sell a vacant unit as the owner would sell for maximum price. Currently, in some areas, there is 6 months of inventory and no guarantee the vacant unit will fetch a high price. Yes, that's
absolutely correct. But what I'll tell you this though is the tenant unit is not going to sell. So if you need to sell it, well,
yeah,
the vacant property is going to sell. The tenant property is not going to sell.
Yep. Okay, that one's done. I have a question on signing notices. When there are 2 tenants and the forms ask for phone number and signatures, can I just add the phone number? Okay, so I understand. On an N11, there is a spot for signature for the landlord and a spot, and this is on the second page, a spot for the tenant. But it's only one spot, and if you have multiple tenants, what do? So you print another copy of page 2, and put the second tenant's name on that. If there's more than two, you just print out however many page twos that you need and get each tenant to sign in the appropriate spot. So that's easy. That's an easy one. I have a question on, we just did that. The LTB backlog and eviction process is an absolute gong show. So when you say that, you must be of a certain age, because anybody sort of under, I'm going to say under 40 might not know what the gong show is. And no wonder many think twice about being a landlord. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is one of the things that I've been saying for a while, which is that, we keep hearing about housing crisis and what can we do? Well, most of my clients who are small landlords, once we get the tenant out, they've said quite categorically they'll never ever become a landlord again. And so the market is diminishing exponentially because of that. I recently did something on CBC The National about that with Adrian Arsenault, and there's another program that's going to be aired in the next 2 weeks that speaks to this issue quite succinctly. Okay. Recording we've dealt with. Contact for Elaine.
I just posted your web page on there.
Okay, done. And just so you guys know, I'm often in Zoom hearings, so I can't always answer my phone. So, don't just keep phoning me every 5 minutes. If I'm in a hearing, I'm in a hearing. I won't answer my phone while I'm in a hearing. Okay, and as a buyer for a client who wants to purchase a tenanted property, you've explained all the risks and still want to proceed. What happens at closing if the tenant doesn't vacate? Well, it depends on what your purchase and sale agreement says. So but is the seller in breach? Potentially. Does the agreement become null and void and deposit returned to buyer? Does there need to be verbiage? Okay. So great question, Sonia. The answer really falls back to what does your purchase and sale agreement say? And this is why I said up front, you need to have language in there to protect your clients, if you're a real estate agent, in the event that the deal falls apart because a tenant won't vacate. I'm going to throw this to you, Alex. Is there something that you want to add?
Yeah, just have your proper clauses in there, and also deal with for your closing with the lawyer. You want to make sure you got a good lawyer on the closing that understands how to sell these properties as well. When it gets into trouble, that's when the paralegal comes in. Most lawyers don't handle tenant-related issues, but you want a lawyer that knows how to close a tenanted property.
That's a great point, Alex, because I get lawyers calling me all day long, and they don't know how to deal with the tenant. So there are many lawyers out there who actually know very well, and I'm happy to recommend some should the need arise. But before you choose your lawyer, you should ask them that, and don't just choose that lawyer because your real estate agent recommended them. They may be great, but if you got and I'm going to just explain this. So I'm just dealing with buying a property that is on indigenous land, so it's a land lease. And so this sort of property is nuanced, and my brother's a lawyer, and he does real estate, and and he's not doing my closing.
Yep.
And he wouldn't even be charging me. I have to pay somebody else. But be smart about it. It's money well spent. Get the right person. What is the site name? I guess it's my website, which is Page.
Oh no, it's the open the tenant
openroom.ca.
Okay.
Is it?
I'll let you say it one more time because I probably talked over you in that one.
That's okay. Open room, OPEN room, ROOM.ca.
Great. And those were on Elaine's info I put in the chat. Okay, so I'll let you. We got time for a couple more, and then we'll end it. But if you have questions, Elaine's info is going to be shared at the end, and her information is valuable. So, but I'll also add, because Elaine and I had this one time, please be respectful to Elaine as well, and her services are valuable. So if you're asking for advice, and you may get charged. But I will tell you what
You will get charged.
You will get charged. What Elaine charges you is a fraction of the cost of what it's gonna cost you if you make the mistakes and go down the wrong road. And I also want to add this, and I'm going into question time, but do not be the person that seeks out the answer that you want, because you can find the answer you want online. It doesn't mean it's right. Elaine has the right answers, because you can always find the answer that you want in this age of information. You can find someone that gives you the answer you want. It doesn't mean it's right, and it could cost you a lot of money. Let's answer 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap it up, Elaine.
Okay, would recommend that a landlord ask the tenant to vacate prior to the listing. Yes, we talked about this in a legal duplex, where one unit is occupied but the other unit is vacant, and you're like, yeah. I mean, if the intention is to potentially renovate that unit, then that's really a real estate question, to be honest, because there might be a scenario where a buyer might say, well, I've got rental income coming in and a place to live, so that might be of a benefit to somebody. So that's something you should probably canvass with your real estate agent.
Yeah.
Right, like, it's hard to know. It depends on location, it depends on market, it depends on there's too many factors to just make a general statement. Why are landlords associations not complaining about the unfair delays in dealing with the hearings? They are.
They absolutely are.
Small landlords are losing their life savings over professional tenants out to cheat the system. No one cares. I get why you feel like that, Joseph. There are lots of people trying to do lots of things. There's an organization called SOLO, which is Single Owner Landlords of Ontario. I think there's 5,000 or 6,000 landlords in that group. They've become a lobby group. There's an ombudsman that's been put in place now that's monitoring what's going on. So it's not that nobody cares. They do care. And there's work being done to fix the very broken system. Not fast enough, but it's being done. Sally says, I use paralegals religiously for tenanted properties. Cash for keys is wonderful too. Elaine, your advice to real estate agents whose clients ask to see a tenanted property, you advise that the agent deters them from doing so. I would caution you and all agents that this practice would contravene our code of ethics. I would also add that helping agents need to help tenants find new accommodations, as we have other properties in our network too. Collaborative is key. Sally, you make a good point. I wanted to just clarify what I said so that I don't get, hate mail. I'm saying that I would never tell an agent not to look at a tenanted property on behalf of them. I would never do that. I'm saying, though, that the appetite to look at a tenanted property is less than if there is no tenant. That's what I'm saying.
Correct. And if you go to buyers and you ask them if they want to see a tenanted property, they make the decision that they don't want to see the tenanted property. That's the key. So I'm glad that was brought up, and that's correct. It's not that you're telling people not to show the tenanted properties. The buyer's making the decision that they don't want to see the tenanted properties.
Right. But Sally makes a really good point, and I want to address that, which is that particularly if you're an agent, a lot of times the tenant might be willing to leave but doesn't have the ability to find another place. So offering your services to help the tenant find another unit to move into is a great idea, and I would encourage it. And as Sally has indicated, if you're in a brokerage that's handling tenanted units, you may have stuff on your right at your office that's perfect for this prospective tenant. So by all means, anything you can do to assist a tenant in relocating, I would encourage you to do.
Great. And again, what I would say is anyone that has more questions, we didn't get to all of them because again, we could be here all afternoon on these questions. send an email to me or reach out to Elaine. Elaine's going to charge you for her services, but it's going to save you some money. I will tell you that. But Elaine, Paige, thank you so much for taking the time and speaking with us today. I've shared Elaine's info in the chat. You will also get Elaine's info on the follow-up email, the recap email we do after that. Thank you, everyone. And Elaine, thank you so much for coming online. Okay, we'll talk to everyone soon.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. Have a great day, everybody.
Okay, bye, everyone.